Welcome to my story time by mybooksummary.com. Get ready for quick wisdom of countless stories and explore. World War II, 1939 to 1945. World War II, 1939 to 1945, was one of the most destructive and defining conflicts in human history, with consequences that shaped the world for decades. It involved most of the world's nations and saw unprecedented levels of violence, including the Holocaust, the dropping of atomic bombs, and the formation of new political orders. With an estimated 70 to 85 million casualties, including both military and civilian deaths, the war forever altered the global landscape, bringing about the fall of empires, the rise of superpowers, and the creation of the United Nations. Here, we will explore the causes, key events, battles, and consequences of World War II in comprehensive detail. Causes of World War II. Unresolved tensions from World War I and rise of totalitarianism. World War II did not emerge in a vacuum, but was the result of long-standing tensions from the aftermath of World War I, economic hardships, and the rise of authoritarian regimes. The Treaty of Versailles and its aftermath. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended World War I but imposed harsh conditions on Germany. It required Germany to accept responsibility for the war, pay heavy reparations, and surrender large portions of its territory. These punitive measures contributed to economic instability and political unrest in Germany, creating fertile ground for the rise of Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party. The discontent in Germany was mirrored in other parts of Europe. Italy, despite being on the victorious side in World War I, faced economic turmoil and political chaos. The failure of the Italian government to address these issues allowed Benito Mussolini to rise to power, establishing a fascist dictatorship. In Japan, military leaders who favored expansionist policies gained power, believing that the country's economic survival depended on acquiring more territory. This led to Japan's invasion of China in 1937, further contributing to the instability of the international system. The rise of totalitarianism and aggression. Adolf Hitler's rise to power in 1933 was one of the most significant catalysts for World War II. Hitler's Nazi Party capitalized on economic hardship and nationalist sentiment, promising to restore Germany's greatness. The Nazis implemented aggressive expansionist policies, particularly in Eastern Europe, aiming to unite all ethnic Germans and establish a greater German empire. Hitler's belief in the superiority of the Aryan race and his desire for territorial expansion drove the military buildup and territorial annexations that would eventually lead to war. Mussolini's fascist regime in Italy pursued similar expansionist ambitions, invading Ethiopia in 1935. Japan, which had already annexed Manchuria in 1931, continued its aggression in China and other parts of Asia. The rise of these totalitarian regimes, with their aggressive expansionist policies, contributed to the increasing tensions that would eventually ignite the conflict. The outbreak of war. 1939. The immediate cause of World War II was Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939. This invasion followed a non-aggression pact signed between Germany and the Soviet Union in August 1939, known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This agreement allowed Germany to invade Poland without fear of Soviet intervention. In response, Britain and France, who had treaties of alliance with Poland, declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. This marked the beginning of the largest and most widespread conflict in history. Over the next several years, the war would expand across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. The early phase of the war, 1939 to 1941. The initial phase of the war was marked by rapid German victories. Germany employed a military strategy known as Blitzkrieg, lightning war, which involved swift, coordinated attacks using infantry, tanks, and air power to overwhelm and disorient the enemy. The fall of France and the Battle of Britain. Germany invaded France through Belgium in May 1940. Within weeks, German forces had bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line and encircled the French army. The French government was forced to sign an armistice with Germany on June 22, 1940, and the country was divided into a German-occupied zone and the Vichy regime, a puppet government in the south. After the fall of France, Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. The Battle of Britain, fought between the Royal Air Force, RAF, and the German Luftwaffe, became a turning point in the war. Despite intense bombing raids on British cities, the RAF managed to repel the German attacks, marking the first major defeat of the Nazis in the war. The invasion of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa. In June 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, breaking the non-aggression pact between Germany and the Soviet Union. The German forces advanced deep into Soviet territory, but the harsh winter, logistical issues, and fierce Soviet resistance halted their progress. The Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943, would become one of the turning points of the war, with Soviet forces encircling and defeating the German Sixth Army, marking the first major defeat for Hitler's forces. The attack on Pearl Harbor and U.S. entry into the war. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack crippled much of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, but it also led directly to the United States' entry into World War II. The following day, the United States declared war on Japan. On December 11th, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States, bringing the U.S. into the European theater as well. The turning of the tide, 1942 to 1943. By 1942, the war had reached a critical juncture. In both the European and Pacific theaters, the Axis powers were beginning to experience significant setbacks. The Battle of Midway, the Pacific turnaround. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway, June 1942, was a decisive victory for the United States. U.S. forces, aided by code-breaking intelligence, ambushed the Japanese fleet and destroyed 4 aircraft carriers, effectively weakening Japan's naval power. This victory marked a turning point in the Pacific War and shifted the balance of power in favor of the Allies. The Battle of El Alamein and the North African Campaign. In North Africa, British forces under General Bernard Montgomery defeated the German Afrika Korps at the Battle of El Alamein in October-November 1942. This victory halted the Axis advance in North Africa and paved the way for the Allied invasion of Italy in 1943. The Soviet counteroffensive. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union began to push back German forces after their defeat at Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad and the subsequent Soviet counteroffensive in 1943 marked the beginning of a steady German retreat. By the summer of 1944, the Soviets were advancing toward Eastern Europe, while the Western Allies had successfully landed in Normandy, France. D-Day and the liberation of Western Europe, 1944. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, the invasion of Normandy, also known as D-Day. More than 156,000 Allied troops, including American, British, and Canadian forces, landed on the beaches of Normandy, France. The success of D-Day allowed the Allies to establish a foothold in Western Europe, and the liberation of France began. By the fall of 1944, the Allies had pushed into Belgium and were advancing toward Germany. The final phases of the war, 1945. By early 1945, the Axis powers were on the defensive on all fronts. In the Pacific, the U.S. continued its island-hopping campaign, capturing key islands in preparation for final assault on Japan. In Europe, the Allies continued to advance, while the Soviet Union closed in on Berlin from the east. The fall of Berlin and the end of the war in Europe. In April 1945, Soviet forces encircled Berlin. After days of intense fighting, the German capital fell on May 2, 1945. Hitler, who had been holed up in his bunker, committed suicide on April 30, 1945. With Berlin's fall, the war in Europe officially ended on May 8, 1945, known as V-Day, Victory in Europe Day. The atomic bombings and Japan's surrender. In the Pacific, the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. The bombings caused unprecedented destruction and loss of life, leading Japan to announce its surrender on August 15, 1945. The formal surrender ceremony took place on September 2, 1945, officially ending World War II. Consequences of World War II. World War II left a profound legacy on the global stage. The war resulted in the establishment of the United Nations in 1945, an international organization aimed at promoting peace and preventing future conflicts. The war also set the stage for the Cold War, as the US and the Soviet Union emerged as the two superpowers, with ideological differences that led to decades of tension. The war caused widespread devastation, with millions of lives lost, cities destroyed, and economies shattered. It also led to significant social and political changes, such as the decolonization movement, the rise of the US as a global superpower, and the reshaping of Europe with the division of Germany, and the start of the Cold War. The Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany, remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. World War II forever altered the course of the 20th century, and its impact is still felt today in international relations, politics, and global governance. Conclusion: World War II was not only a military conflict, but a global catastrophe that changed the course of human history. The war's complex causes, the key events that unfolded, and the unimaginable human suffering it caused all contributed to its significance. While the war ended in 1945, its effects continue to shape the world in ways that we are still grappling with today. Stay tuned for more enlightening content. Head over to www.mybooksummery.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share the magic with friends, and let's grow together through the power of books and interesting stories.